We're here to talk about the latest tech news, and because this is the new year, the biggest trends in 2011, at least as we see them.
I want to talk about Groupon a little bit. Um,
Yeah, sure. I'm a huge Groupon fan and bull, and
it's hard not
uh,
to be. I mean, there are very few things you can
yeah,
point
yeah,
to that aren't working for the company.
right. I think that Groupon, if you want to take the sort of 10,000-foot view, uh, I think that what Groupon is fundamentally about is helping small businesses make the internet work for them. I think at the end of the day, that's what they're doing. We've been waiting for 15 years for, mom and pop to finally get it, quote unquote, and start, putting up a nice website and tweeting and buying Google AdWords and finally realizing that this translates to actual increased revenues. And but the problem is that there's a huge education problem. It changes all the time, and if it's not your job to know what the latest startup is, you're going to have a problem, and so on and so forth. And I think that in the sort of, like, if you're trying to imagine what Groupon will be, 5 or 10 years from now, that's what they're doing. They're not just about group buying. They're about helping small businesses make the internet work for them. And
Hmm.
and I think that's just incredibly exciting as an idea when you look at the failure rate. I mean, not just talking about Groupon, but if you look at the failure rate for small businesses and how many small business owners are people who are, passionate but maybe not so business savvy, and everyone's for many of those businesses, just a few more customers through the door would push them into the black. And so
Hmm.
I think it's one of the most transformative companies, at least potentially, of course, I've
Yeah.
seen in a very long time.
A couple of things that really excite me about Groupon, beyond the company itself. First of all, I love that this company came out of the middle of nowhere and came out of Chicago. People in Silicon Valley have been trying to solve this local problem for 15 years. And frankly, I just think people in Silicon Valley are not in touch with what an average small business in middle America is doing or needing and feeling. And that's why they haven't been able to.
Yeah,
And so it's not a surprise to me that the person who would finally come up with this, I mean, if you think about it, Google got close, not close, but it got us further than Yahoo or AOL certainly did. I think Yelp
right.
deserves a lot of credit for getting us further, particularly when it came to
Yeah,
restaurants, service providers. I think in some parts of the country, Foursquare took that to another level. But I mean, Groupon just came out and absolutely hit it out of the park. I mean, everything you just said gave retailers
yeah,
a clear, obvious reason they need to use this and why it can make a huge difference. And it almost was a magic bullet for them in a time where small businesses are going out of business
yeah,
because of the recession. I mean, I think you can't overstate what you just said and how long this took the industry to get there and how seemingly easily they pulled it off. And I think that
yeah.
almost never would have come out of Silicon Valley. Obvious example is Dig. How does Kevin feel now?
Yeah,
Does he wish he had sold for 200, 300 million when he had the opportunity to? Took a partial liquidation
yeah, sure.
too, and his investors encouraged him to keep going because it was still growing. And they certainly had some leadership issues. I think they didn't innovate fast enough. I mean, the things that they were saying, was their vision in 2006, I still haven't really seen built out on the site. So I think that you can point to some execution issues, but at the same time, I mean, Dig gets a bad rap for being a has-been, but they actually pioneered what became every share button on the web, what became Twitter, what became a new way to
Yeah,
aggregate news. In hindsight, do they
yeah,
wish
that's
they
true.
had sold? It's hard to say because I think particularly in the
Yeah,
Valley,
yeah,
there's such a pride in wanting to build a big company thing. It's not just a money thing. So I'm not sure that $1 million or so he took off the table, is giving him a lot of comfort right now. There was a Citibank report that came out last week that identified internet video as one of the big growth trends they saw. What jumped out at me is, how far along is internet video? And the biggest, they're saying, oh, the revenues, like, internet video is just not making money. it is, we are just not figuring out how to monetize this for the amount of users, for the amount of traction, for how big these properties have gotten. I mean, it's like what I was saying before. Internet video is a classic example to me of tons of eyeballs, tons of attention, and the fact that we're only now in 2011 starting to get to the
Yeah,
size where the aggregate revenue for the whole category is about what Google paid for YouTube, you know, like 5 years ago. It is it is a hard category to nail. And, I
yeah,
think we
yeah,
are still very early innings. I think a lot of companies are going to keep getting washed out. I mean, look, I think even at
yeah,
TechCrunch, we've been doing TechCrunch TV now for 6 months, and there's some successes, but there's others that aren't. I mean, I did launch this show on Yahoo Finance with your pal Henry Blodgett a couple years ago, and look, we had 4 times the reach of CNBC in terms of users, in terms of traffic, in terms of everything. It was a massive,
right.
massive win. And yet Yahoo really struggled to sell one sponsor for it.
The
I don't know.
problem with
I'm
internet
just not
video
bullish on
is
internet video.
that people aren't cutting the cord. They just aren't. People are still willing to pay for
Hmm.
TV. The average Joe, the average consumer just doesn't has no idea what an internet TV is. Just as it's obvious for
Right.
geeks that your TV should have the internet, it's obvious for the average consumer, and I agree with the average consumer that TV is TV and the internet is the internet, and the two are different.
Yeah.
And I think that's right because TV is fundamentally leaned back, and computers are fundamentally leaned forward. So I think even though they're square screens that glow bright and show
Yeah.
images, I think they're different.